What's up, team? Welcome to a patch breakdown video. Now let's be honest. I want you to be honest with me, team. Do you want to hear excuses for why I'm a lazy piece of shit and don't make videos lately? Or do you not want to hear those excuses? I'm just gonna assume you're just very good people, all of you, and you don't want to hear those excuses. And let's just accept that I'm a bad person in this case. This is not funny. This is not funny. I should have been making more videos. I have 2 videos recorded on my hard drive right now, but before we waste 5 more minutes on useless stories in this video, we're going to talk about this. As you can see here, it says version 3.8. So here is New Patch 3.8 is kind of no big deal. I mean, just like the biggest patch, the biggest gameplay patch in HoN history, so it would be pretty good to go over it. Nothing special, just some most gameplay changes ever put into a single patch. And can you see this cat? There. You guys have to like the video now. Obviously you can have any kind of problem when there's a cat. You understand. I'm wasting time showing my cat in the biggest patch history of HoN. To sum up this patch, the entire item system has been reworked. So usually only have some amount of heroes affected by the patch, or we introduce like one or a few new items, implement a few changes, and they only affect a certain pool of heroes. In this case, however, the rework of the item system is so huge that almost every hero, probably every hero is affected. But before we get into that, let me waste a bit more of your time with a story about a young SomaZ. So SomaZ was young, and he was playing HoN, and he was enjoying it. And in those games, he was buying items on his heroes, and that was cool. And he learned those items well, he knew how they worked, he knew which items were the most cost efficient, and he got pretty good at buying them. But then one day SomaZ thought, I wonder, what if I could somehow possibly look at the enemy team and what they get, or what heroes they are rather, and what I should get to counter those heroes. Man, if only I could know that when there's a lot of casters on the enemy team, for example, that spam skills, a mana battery is good. Maybe I could take a look and see that the majority of their damage is magic, so I could get some magic armor. Just specifically countering enemy heroes. That would be a very nice skill to have, but it's so difficult, I thought back then. It would be almost impossible. I already have so much going on that I have to think about in my games, and now on top of everything, I need to also look at the enemy team and buy items to counter them. That's just way too difficult. But maybe one day. And that day came eventually where I actually learned to counter heroes. This wasn't too long ago, but I would say maybe a year or so ago or less. I learned to look at the enemy heroes, kind of judge what kind of damage they have, how much physical, how much magical damage they have, specific hero counters. Maybe I need a Null Stone, which is good this game. Maybe a Shrunken Head would be a better choice. Maybe my cat would go insane in the background for literally no reason suddenly. Or maybe perhaps I needed to buy Nullfire Blade to dispel some debuff on the enemy team. And I've learned this very well. Most of my games, I would be able to do it quite well. And I don't want to brag, and I don't take this as me bragging, but I sort of learned the item system inside out. And the result was that the game got a little bit stale for me. And this kind of happens with all of the games I play nowadays. I play for a few hours and then I get bored. Doesn't matter what game it is, I will play for a few hours and then I'll be like, meh, I'm tired, I want to go play something else. I knew the entire item system inside out, which meant that every game I kind of already knew what I had to do, and it was just down to my execution of it. I mean, I became skillful at the game, sure, but there was kind of nothing new left to explore. And then this patch comes with so many item changes that everything I knew, well, not everything, but a lot of the stuff I knew is just completely thrown out the window. And this is a completely new experience. I've been playing non-stop the entire time, and I just want to play more and more, and I haven't had this feeling in a very long time. And I'm super, super extremely happy about that. HoN is so much fun now that I forgot what I was going to say. That's how fun is now. So I know a lot of people don't like change, no matter what it is. But I just want you to trust me on this one, alright? And take the approach I did. I learned the item system quite well. I had a lot of knowledge and a lot of skill and a lot of time I put into learning that item system. And all of that is getting thrown out. Not all of it, but most of it is getting thrown out. I have to relearn everything. And I am happy about it. I'm happy that I have new things to explore. I'm happy that we have a lot more strategic options, because this patch, the changes weren't just made for the sake of changes, but they were actually good changes that increased the amount of strategy and options in the game. I'm just having a lot of fun in game. I just encourage everyone to just try this patch and to just not worry too much about it, okay? I know some people like to try hard, and some people want to find the most cost-efficient item that you can go for and the cost efficiency of every new item and break everything down. But I didn't even get to that. I'm like just trying the new items. I'm at the stage where I'm just trying things. Because I can't tell you what is cost efficient and what isn't, because so many items receive changes. And it could be so different. Items that didn't receive changes could be better or worse now because how the changed items compared to them now. This is a huge patch. There are a huge amount of item changes, alright? And I just want you to do this with me and accept that it can't possibly be that all of these changes are super perfect and super good. Alright? There's bound to be changes that some people won't like. Like, you might not like some changes, I might not like some other changes, and I want to say that that is fine. Usually I'm very strict about this and I expect HoN patches to be perfect, but with this huge amount of changes, I think it's just unreasonable to expect everything to be absolutely perfect. So just kind of approach this patch with an open mind, alright? There's a lot of new things added, and things will get adjusted with time, things will get balanced out, okay? So first we're going to go through the relatively small amount of hero changes. Now, when I say it's okay or it's fine, that means that the change was probably a buff to an underpowered hero or a nerf to a slightly overpowered hero. So I won't go too much into detail on some of them in order to save time. And Arachne is one of those changes. It's fine. You can read it if you really want. Her third skill got nerfed, as you can see, and it's fine. And that's really all I'm going to say about changes like this. Now here's the Artesia rework. So before I say anything, do you like or hate this rework? Now, if you answer that you hate it, you need to post your account name in the comment section below so that I can permanently ban you from HoN for not liking a change I did. Alright? Permanent ban. And all sub accounts as well, please. I need to make sure you're out of... I'm joking. That I'm really good at jokes, alright? So this is a rework that I was mainly working on, but I don't want to say that it was 100% me. A lot of designers had input on this, and a lot of people gave feedback, which I listened to and adjusted the changes based on them. So this isn't just me doing whatever the hell I want, but more like the rework I was in charge of. I came up with a lot of the stuff in it, and I implemented and executed a lot of stuff in it. So Artesia, this is the only hero change that I will go very in depth into because it's my rework. Let's be serious. Artesia had two main problems that I saw with her and the reason why she received the rework. This is sort of my personal opinion more, but a lot of other designers might disagree with me. More likely they will agree on what I'm about to say, but in general, Artesia, first of all, overlapped. She was a hero that didn't really do anything special. She did a lot of magic damage, and she could relatively quickly spend her mana for it. Like Elonia. Except Elonia, at the very least, has some kind of interesting slowing mechanic where you can build up charges and slow heroes to crawl or use your E for massive damage. And she had a skill that did damage globally. Like Thunderbringer, like Bombardier. So she really didn't do anything that was that unique or special. The only thing that was unique about Artesia is that she probably could put out the most amount of magic damage in a short period of time. Although that's arguable with a farmed Ravenor. But she could just get a ton of charges and fire them all, and that was kind of really all she did. The second problem with Artesia was that they made this strength, the strength of her, of dealing a lot of damage, so good that in order to keep her balanced and Make no mistake, Artesia was balanced. Like, a lot of people have probably said, you just had to buff her, why did you change it? Artesia was balanced. She did not need buffs. I want to preface that. She did not need buffs. If you want to buff her, something else had to be nerfed about her. So her strength was so good, she did in some situations so much damage, that everything else about the hero had to be made worse. She's very squishy. She has huge mana issues. She has no escape mechanism. Her skill shot can be easily missed. And there's just a lot of ways to completely counter her. She has so many weaknesses, and it showed in one very specific way. She's one of the, or was one of the least played heroes in HoN. I think she was like the 5th least played hero. So down there with heroes that like have multiple units to control. That's how bad it was. She was never picked in competitive games that I remember ever. Maybe like I think in Gold and Diamond League, never have I ever seen an Artesian. I don't think anyone ever got her seriously. Maybe in some like random like few games she's picked up, but she's not picked up in low or normal or high matchmaking usually. Nobody plays her because her weaknesses are just so terrible to play with. And that's what the rework is aimed at. First of all, to make up for some of her weaknesses, and second of all, to make her more unique, to give her something special that, oh, they picked Artesia, that means they can do X now, and not like, oh, Artesia, yeah, that hero exists. So the first thing about Arcane Missile, you will notice is that the cooldown has been reduced on early levels, from 5 to 4 on level 1. On the later levels it was increased a bit. Damage, also, you might think that, oh wow, on level 4 it went from 220 to 175, that's such a huge nerf. But early game, it was increased from 100 to 115. Now, this change is aimed at making her laning phase a bit better, because in the laning phase, Artesia has one huge weakness, and that is if you just stand behind creeps, she's completely useless. If you're not terrible, if you just stand behind creeps and play carefully, if she gets out of position to try hit you, just kill her, because she just dies. Now the second part, beyond just making her a bit better in the laning phase and the reasoning, is that it makes her better as a support hero. Because previously, where she wouldn't really contribute much, if at all, as a support, now at least she can output some really good damage early on. So next, the homing strength of her Q has been increased. This is for 2 reasons. The second reason is the second mode that I will tell you later about. And the first reason is that her Q was just, sometimes it was possible to kind of run around it and it would miss. Like, you would fire correctly in the direction of the enemy hero and he would still somehow dodge it. It was pretty ridiculous. The explosion radius has been increased, which is actually an increase to her carry potential, in a sense, because the point of this is to make her a better pusher and to make her a better farmer. So kind of defining her more in those roles. This is again one of those things where she really had to suffer because her damage output could be potentially so high. Mana cost rescales are not very important. The ability now has a second mode. More details on that below. Yeah, let's go more details on that below later. Now the second skill, the Dance of Death. The second skill was mainly used for the charges it gave to your Q. It sort of had the heal, but I never really ran into a situation where I specifically used it or leveled it up to like think, oh, I'll be able to heal. It's more like I would suddenly find myself with low health, and then I would look at my second ability and I'd be like, oh yeah, that heals. And I have mana right now. Click. That was how my thought process would usually go. Now, giving Q charges is what enabled her to deal that super ton of damage. And if we were to make up for some of the Artesia's weaknesses to make her a better hero, we had to tone down her damage. So the giving Q charges part got removed. Now another reason why the heal was more of an afterthought is because it was very difficult to use this ability in the middle of battle. You would almost always use it to prepare your charges because if you're forced to stand still for a few seconds for a small heal on such a squishy hero, you're gonna get destroyed. So now she can move while channeling. She can't attack, but she can still cast skills and move, which first of all makes the bolt firing part of the skill actually good because the enemy can't just run away and be completely out of range of it, especially now that the range of the third skill has been buffed a little bit, as you can see here. The other part is that you can use it in the middle of the battle now, and even when you're trying to escape as sort of a defensive mechanism, as to say, hey, I'm going to use my W now, and if you want to keep chasing me, you're going to have to take damage while you are chasing me. We also took the cool part of releasing the bolts and we made the bolts release a lot faster. So that is like a barrage of bolts, which just looks and functions awesomely. The cooldown of this ability begins when the channel stops, so that you can't just channel for the maximum duration and then almost have it ready again. At the same time, you're not punished very hard if it somehow gets cancelled or if you cancel it, but in general, you won't want to cancel this ability. It's just very good. It also helps another issue with Artesia where she gets countered really hard if people just stand behind creeps. So basically, if the enemies are hiding behind creeps, you can now just activate this ability and shoot your Q through them. This also helps in team fights when maybe there's like a creep or something between you and the hero, which again makes Q so difficult to land, or maybe you're trying to use the second mode and there's creeps in the way, which we'll talk about in a second. So just in general, a lot of quality of life improvements to the ability. The only thing that I maybe don't like about it is that you gain very little if you don't level your Q or E. Otherwise, it just basically gives you unit walking, and that's kind of it. So we'll move on to E, and the first thing I want to mention is the second mode. Your third skill can now be activated. It's no longer just passive. It's leveled automatically on level 1, but it doesn't give you anything besides being able to activate it to switch between two modes. You have to level it up to get the bolts and stuff. The second mode is the healing mode. When you switch into this mode, your Q targets allies instead of enemies. And when hitting them, it will heal them instead of damaging. And your E, your bolts, will also heal allies instead of damaging enemies. It also affects your ultimate. I'll talk about that later. But another thing we did is we reduced the damage by a lot, but we increased the number of bolts fired from 2 to 4, and also made them fire faster. This was partially done because it looks cooler, and partially because it helps with some of their RNG involved. When there's few bolts, there's a very high chance that they won't go to who you want. For example, if you have 2 bolts and you have 2 enemy heroes standing there and you want to like hit one of them at least once, if you only have 2 bolts, the chances of hitting that hero are much lower than if you had 4. When you have 4, at least one of them is probably gonna hit him. So when there are more bolts, they're kind of more evenly spread out, and it solves some of the RNG issues and also looks cooler. And the range was increased because honestly their low range was so ridiculous that most of the time this skill was completely useless unless you were literally next to people. Most of the time, like your Q has, with the homing taken into account, your Q goes up to 1600 range. So 16, 7. Just to give you the difference. So the range has been increased, and now the second skill you can move while channeling, which helps you actually make the skill useful. Which is why the damage had to be toned down a lot, because the skill is now actually useful. Finally we get to the ultimate. Now the problem with the ultimate was that once you land it, the enemy just runs away and that's it. He can just run out of range, and that's all your ultimate can do. Yet again, another weakness, because on the off chance that you do land all of your damage on that hero who fails to run away, it's just gonna absolutely destroy him. So the new change is that the ultimate can now be moved on an 8-second cooldown. And it goes on a 5-second cooldown when the projection gets attacked, which is good counterplay. So it's not just completely overpowered broken, there are ways to play against it. Now, because the ultimate can be moved, you now can take it with you everywhere. You can take it during a push forward. You can keep chasing an enemy hero. If they run out of range, it's no longer useless. There's just a lot of good stuff that comes out of it. As you can see here, the range has been reduced from global to 800. As I mentioned at the start, Artesia was like Thunderbringer and Bombardier in a sense where she had a global damaging skill. Now that that's removed, Bombardier and Thunderbringer are better and more unique in their roles, because now they have something that not a lot of hero has, and instead we can put that power that we removed from Artesia onto something else, like being able to move the projection and all the other parts of the hero, like making her unique with her second mode. Now, although the range is 800, this is 800 from where you stand currently. You can place your ultimate, teleport to another lane, and move it with you there. That's absolutely possible. The mana cost has been also reduced because, quite honestly, it was freaking ridiculous. The other unique part of the hero that I actually failed to mention so far is her ability to double cast, how her rod from the ultimate mimics her casts. That's a unique part of the hero. So this, along with the cooldown reduction, promotes that use of the ultimate for that unique purpose of double casting and just kind of feeds into that interesting playstyle. However, these buffs were quite significant. being able to move your ultimate is a huge deal. The cooldown reduction is a huge deal. The mana cost reduction is a huge deal. So it had to be adjusted. And at first we just straight up nerfed the health and mana regen. But then we decided, well, she has two modes. What if we can keep the mana and health regen strong, but we separate it so that one mode is healing, one mode is mana only. So you can focus on that part. And I think it has worked wonders. We were able to kind of keep the strength of the regeneration. And finally, the Staff of the Master effect increases the cast range of your ultimate to 5,000, which gives you some interesting map presence, but is not quite global. So let's talk Artesia. What did we do with these changes? What was the aim of these changes? First of all, it gave Artesia a lot more flavor and a lot more uniqueness. She actually has something special now, which is probably the strongest heal in the game. Just straight up, to one target or potentially multiple targets, Artesia is unmatched in terms of how much she can heal in a short period of time or just over some period of time. However, it comes with certain downsides, which, first of all, her heal is a skill shot that you can miss, or perhaps something can get between you and the target. And her E is a little bit random based, so it's not completely super focused. But she is the best healer in the game in terms of sheer amount of it. And she should still be a decent damage dealer, and her farming abilities have been improved a little bit. The other unique part of her, the double casting, has been improved greatly as well, where her ultimate now plays a much more active role in the hero's design. And she also kind of serves as a walking fountain, as we called her, where your ultimate can now be moved with you together, and you have an easier time healing your allies instead of just placing it and being like, hey guys, stand here for 20 seconds to get this heal. So you don't have to do that. You can take a much more active role in helping your team with mana or health regen. And I'm just really glad with how this hero came up. My only worry is that potentially she could maybe be overpowered. I really hope she isn't, and if she's underpowered, there's probably going to be changes in the next patch or so where we'll quickly buff her up a little bit to give her help. But right now we're releasing her a bit on the weaker side just to play it safe, because it could be ridiculous. Like these changes could be absolutely destructive, and I'm just hoping they're not. I'm like refreshing the hero stats page to see her win percent constantly when it will update. And from that we move on to Behemoth. It's fine. Berserker, it's fine. It's okay. Bombardier, it's okay. Babos, it's cool. It's totally cool. Cersei, this change is kind of significant. Half a second extra immobilized duration is kind of strong. Going from 3 to 3.5 seconds is sort of a big deal. And early going from 1.5 to 2, sort of a big deal. Could make Cersei a lot stronger. Deadlift. Now this is also these are also changes I sort of had a hand in. So the death grip, the channel duration reduced from 4.6 to 4.5 seconds was just because, why was it 4.6 seconds? Why such a random number? I don't know. It was changed to 4.5 seconds because just why 4.6? Now, a lot of people expressed concerns how, oh well, your Q has a ridiculous range and it's almost impossible to dodge, OP. So we nerfed and give it more counterplay. The speed at which it moves has been decreased from 7 to 600. This might not seem like too much, but this is actually a pretty big deal, because the maximum movement speed is 522. 700 is quite a bit more than 522, but 600 is quite close to 522. And if you're at a decent distance from it, and you have maximum movement speed, you will probably run away from it now. This also affected the maximum distance it travels, but in general we just added more ways to play against it. It's now slower, meaning you have more time to react, you have more chances to kind of trick it, go in a different direction, and if you have a lot of speed you can just run away, have a high chance for that. The second skill has been nerfed. We listened to people. Deadlift is now the top percent winning here on the game. Finally, it's not Hellbringer, thank God, because I was sort of responsible for what happened to Hellbringer, and I was kind of sad about that. He was the top winning percent hero for such a long time, and finally I can blame someone for Deadlift. I'm joking, I'm not going to blame anyone. So the second skill has been nerfed. This line is the most important one. Damage on creeps affected change from enemy creeps only deal 30% of damage to all units affected only deal 50% damage against heroes. What does this mean? It means that when you use your second skill on someone, previously if there were enemy creeps in the mix, they would only deal 30% of damage. But your creeps, like your own ones from your E or any allied ones, would still deal full damage. Now, all creeps deal half damage to heroes, which is a pretty big nerf. Enemy creeps, which will sometimes be your own creeps, which is important, will deal a lot less damage. Your allied creeps as well, and the attack speed bonus has been reduced as well. So overall, a lot less damage against heroes. Now, this is in some cases a small buff to damage against towers because the enemy creeps will deal full damage to towers now. This line here, enemy creeps only deal 30% damage. This applied not just to heroes, but against everything. But this change, new version, only applies against heroes. So all creeps affected will now deal all damage to structures. So if there's a lot of enemy creeps involved, it will be a bit better against structures. I'm repeating myself, I'm a fucking moron. Let's move on. The onslaught radius has been increased. As it says here, this changes just so that your E-creeps get caught in it as well. Because if you're too far, just on the edge, and you cast it, your own creeps sometimes won't get affected, which is bad. So these were 2 nerfs, and we're hoping these 2 nerfs are enough to kind of make a small change. Not sure if this is a buff or a nerf, we'll have to see. To your ultimate, where now it has 2 charges instead of 1. But the amount of health and mana the target gets has been decreased, so now it's more about that. It's pushing the unique thing about Deadlift, which is being able to revive heroes, which I think is a good thing and just a lot of fun, and opens up some interesting possibilities for Staff of the Masters. We'll see how the balance is. My hope with this is that it's enough of a nerf to the hero. Like, I would be happy if he dropped from the first top winning percent to something. If he gets even more crazy now, bad stuff will happen. I need to drink my tea. I'm literally dying. I'm always dying. There are still so many changes left. Electrician, the biggest rework that you need to take over, I'll sum it up quickly. You can now move while your Q is active. So you activate Q, you stun the target, and you can move around. But you can't attack. This is fine. This is fine. Finally nerfed. Screw you. Madman received some pretty good changes. I think he could actually be pretty good now. And his Staff of the Master effect could actually be pretty good now with these changes. Duration being increased, all skills being refreshed instantly, and when you kill a hero, the duration gets increased even further. So potentially some Staff of the Master shenanigans can happen. This is fine, this is fine, this is fine, this is totally fine, this is cool, this is chill cool, this is chill out bro, this is cool chill, and an interesting change, but essentially cool chill. This is, I'm not sure how I feel if this was needed or not. So I'm gonna say almost chill. Tremble is pretty chill dude. Wild Soul is a pretty cool dude. And these movement speed changes are pretty chilly. Willy. Yep. Summed up perfectly. Now we move on to new items. Why are there new items being added? What is this? Some new attack speed item, some new damage item, intelligence item, mana regen item. What the hell, SomaZ? What's going on? This is what we've been waiting for. I've been recording for more than 40 minutes. This video is probably at least 20 minutes long. It took me this long to get to the main point of this patch. Good job, SomaZ. Well done. Well done. Let's move on. The reason these items were added is because we're trying to keep each item to be in at most 4 recipes, to be part of at most 4 recipes. For example, if you take that item Neophyte's book or whatever, the one that gives 10 intelligence, it was part of like 7 different items. So now that has been changed. I'm not sure if this item was necessary, because there are already more than enough damage items. Even if it was removed, there would still be more than enough damage items. So this is the only item change that I'm kind of not okay with. This new item, Voltstone, is a very powerful farming tool. I would say in some cases, when you're playing all random mode or balanced random, you can maybe pick this up at the start as a starting item, but it's relatively early that you can get this. Especially good on junglers, I suppose, that they want this item first. Maybe in some kind of very early pushing strategy you want to pick this item. Overall, I'm pretty happy about this item. I like the idea of it kind of being able to get some early damage specifically against creeps beyond the freaking hatchet, which I'm a little bit unhappy that it didn't get nerfed along with the buckler. Those 2 items you just see every single game on every single melee hero, and I was kind of hoping those would get nerfed. Maybe another time. Arclight Crown, I honestly don't have too much of an opinion on. It's basically the old charged hammer, except it's now a lot better against heroes and a lot worse against farming. So a more hero-focused charged hammer, very attack speed-based item, has a lot of procs, has a slow on it, which I'm not too sure how I feel about, because what happens to Icebrand then? Icebrand has a pretty weak slow, just like this item. It's kind of small, but it has a weak slow, and for Icebrand, it costs an attack modifier to have that slow. For this item, it kind of costs nothing. It just comes out of nowhere. I think this could be a very powerful item if you're specifically looking to get a ton of damage, especially against heroes. I really can't tell you much in the process of this patch review about the cost efficiency of items. Like, really, there's too many new things, like I said previously. I'm just in the process of trying these items out and just kind of having a very basic analysis. It's very difficult for me to say what's going to be overpowered or not so far. But I think this item is okay. In some cases late game, I think it will be preferable to get this because just no other item gives you this much attack speed beyond maybe like the activation period of Elder Parasite. Next item is Blogborn Mall. It gives you 45 strength, which I think is key here. This becomes the item that has the highest amount of strength in the game in a single slot, which is going to be very good for heroes who have base damage bonuses. Heroes like Prisoner with his like E that can give him up to 90%. Hammerstorm goes up to 150%. Maybe potentially Flux, War Beast, and Pandemonium are all choices. Maybe some sort of carry Behemoth could get this item to get a huge bonus to his W. The passive effect, I find this item to be very well designed. Kind of an interesting effect, which reduces your current health every time you attack, but it gives you true damage based on missing health, kind of creates some interesting builds, pushes a lot of underused heroes to potentially be used more. Just an overall good item, I think. The build-up is also interesting. If you plan to get this item later on in the game, you can get a bolstering Alor band just for the +6 strength, and just forget about it until later. I like this item. Jade Spire is an item that I don't have much opinion about, honestly. It's supposedly good on heroes like Ugi and Elonia and such, but I'm not so sure about Elonia at least, because the problem with Elonia is that you either die because you're out of position, or you successfully use all of your skills and all of your mana, and then you're kind of out of mana. And you just kind of can't really like heal when you're low on mana because you need to use skills. Soul Trap is another interesting item that I actually picked up a lot and I really like it. The activation effect is also amazing. That's one of the things about this new patch. All the activations look really cool. Like, the effects are fucking amazing. I don't know what's up with it. This is compared to the old items. It's super interesting. Like, the way it looks and sounds. Now this item, I heard some people say how, well, if I just save up 700 more gold, I can get an Astrolabe. Why would I ever get this item? Well, when you're talking about items this cheap, 700 more gold compared to this price is 70% extra gold, which is a pretty big deal. This item provides some good early mana regeneration, which is quite good early on if you can get it. This literally comes out of nowhere from just completing the recipe. It's not part of the components, which makes it a bit different from Astrolabe. But in general, after you get about 3 kills assists, I probably should explain this a bit more. This item can heal a target ally for 360 health. So it's essentially almost a health potion. You gain a charge when you complete this item, and then you gain a charge every time a hero dies nearby, similar to how you would charge a Blood Chalice or an Icon of the Goddess. Now, it takes about 3 kills assists for this item to pay for itself, and anything you get from there is just extra value. And that's kind of what I think about this item. You just get free health potions essentially once you complete it. It's a good item, especially in strength heroes, which usually lack mana, and the components of it, the 2x Crushing Claws, means that you can sometimes go for a starting build, which involves getting a Crushing Claws, or maybe 2, especially if you're a strength hero, just for the survivability early on, or for the extra damage. Maybe if you're a mid player, it's good to get 2x Crushing Claws. And before it was kind of a problem because you couldn't really turn it into anything, and you had to sell at least one of them. But now you can. Some people think that this item is potentially underpowered. I'm gonna say that I don't know. This is still very new, but I used it and I liked it, and I think it's okay. Spiked Ebola. Now, this is part of a big array of changes, so I have to go a bit in depth here and explain what I mean. I think there's going to develop with these new items a new metagame for carries, alright? So carries now have a second path they can go. So here's the main path where they just get items, they become stronger, maybe pick up some defensive items, and they just try and get super farmed and just crush your team. And now there's a second path where the enemy carries can go for items specifically to counter the enemy carry, which is you, or you go specifically for items to counter enemy carries. This makes you a little bit worse against the entire enemy team because you're probably giving up some damage or some defensive capabilities, but in return you have a much better chance against the enemy carry. When would you want this? Well, in some situations, in some games, you will have an enemy carry who is ahead of you. He has 100, 200 more GPM than you, and he's super farmed, super dangerous. If you try and just farm and catch up to him, he's just gonna kill you. He's just gonna crush you and you're gonna lose. However, you can try and focus on just getting items to just shut down that guy. And if you succeed, you could potentially win the game for your team. Spiked Ebola is one of those items that helps you do this. It's an agility-based expensive item, so it's only really good on agility carries that has anti-carry properties. It has an active ability which disarms the target and deals 200 magic damage. Disarms for 3.5 seconds. You can think of this sort of as an agility sheepstick. Now, Sheepstick is an item that intelligence heroes or support heroes or gankers usually get late game to shut down usually some kind of key enemy hero. This is an agility Sheepstick that you use to shut down the enemy carry for 3.5 seconds. You don't have to be close to the enemy hero, you just have to use it on him. Now, it gets countered sort of easily. One of my worries is that it potentially makes Shrunken Head even better, which is already a really good item. I need to drink this tea. My voice is dying. It gets countered by Nullfire, gets countered by Geometra's Bane, which also dispels debuffs, and it gets countered by the new item Ultra's Heavy Plate, which we will talk about later. But it is one of the options that you can go for if you want to shut down the enemy carry. What does the enemy carry do in response? Does the enemy carry, who is much more farmed than you, keep going for general purpose items and just try and crush your team and risk losing to you specifically? Or does he also try and get counter carry items to counter you countering him? And in that case, you sort of won a little bit in this sort of meta exchange because you forced him to get weaker items against your team overall, just to counter you specifically. So there's a new kind of metagame with new mind games involved, and Spiked Ebola is part of it, in my opinion. Let's move on to the Spyglass, which is an item which you activate and gives you True Strike. True Strike is not an ability to deal true damage. True Strike is the ability to not miss, to go through evasion, to ignore evasion, essentially. So for 16 seconds on a 25, I believe, second cooldown, you can, 25. You gain True Strike, which means you can't miss. Sometimes enemies will have some evasion items, but sometimes you will just be in a situation where you're a ranged hero attacking uphill, which it allows you to not miss those attacks. And there are also a few heroes like Nighthound and Nitro, which this is good against because it counters their evasion. Now, there is one thing about this item. On one hand, it's very cheap, so you can quite easily counter enemy evasion. But on the other hand, it's quite cheap, so you're giving up an item slot just to counter it, essentially. Which sort of reminds me of the way you counter invisibility, where you have to give up a slot, either for a bound die or dust, just to counter the enemy heroes. So this is kind of a decision for you as a carry. If you're behind, the decision is clear. Get this item, because you're probably not going to outfarm the enemy carry. And this is another one of those counter carry options for the counter carry meta for, well, I would say this item is not just for carries, but in general it's going to be better on carries. So that's kind of an interesting way for this item to function. I like it. You're probably thinking, well, what about Savage Mace? It gives True Strike. Next new item is Ultra's Heavy Plate. I have seen this item receive some criticism. By the way, let me just disclosure. I had almost no say in any of these changes, any of these item changes. I had almost no impact on any of this, okay? So this is just my personal thoughts. I'm not like defending my items because they're the best. So this is an item that takes Helm of the Victim, which is the +5 armor, +3 health regen item, plate mail, pickled brain, recipe. And it gives 18 armor, some health regen mana, passively slows attack speed of all enemies nearby by 20%, which is sort of like the old Frostfield plate, which now got removed. And it has an active ability which gives you a ton of armor, which tapers down to 0 over 6 seconds, and dispels or debuffs on use. Now, the thing I kind of don't like about this item is its buff dispelling part, because Shrunken Head, Geometer's Bane, and Nullfire already do that. So I'm just going to be honest here and say that kind of feeling weird about the buff dispelling part. Now, this item has a lot of interesting uses. There's a lot of strategy involved here. Now, first of all, Helm of the Victim. If you plan to go for this item later on, you know that you're going to go for this item. You can get a Helm of the Victim early in the game for the health regen and survivability if you need it, like for example in the laning phase. You don't know what to get, maybe like a life tube or something. No, you go to the side shop and you get a Helm of the Victim. And it's like you survive, and you know that later on you will build it into something so that it's not a waste. Now, 18 armor makes this item the highest amount of armor in a single item slot item. So it's the best item you can get for a single slot to counter physical damage. You want to get this item when the enemy team consists mostly of physical damage. And again, this is a very counter carry item. It gives you a ton of armor, which is a similar effect to Void Talisman, which prevents the enemy carry from killing you. The debuff dispelling part is useful against everyone, but a lot of armor is especially effective against other carries, and its price point is quite high, which makes it sort of better on carry heroes, or heroes who can get a lot of farm, or potentially tanky heroes. So this item also feeds into that against carry metagame. And the passive effect, which also benefits your allies because it affects all enemy heroes nearby, reduces attack speed of all enemies by 20%. Now this is not 20. For example, your standard gloves of the Swift or whatever they're called give you 15 attack speed. They don't give you 15%, they give you 15. But this is 20%, which is a lot more effective than just 20. So again, if you really want to focus on just shutting the enemy carry down, you get, let's say for example, Spiked Ebola to disarm him, you get Ultra's Heavy Plate to just stop a lot of the damage he's doing to you, and stop the damage he's doing to your team thanks to this slow. You get like a Brutalizer to stun him as much as possible. You get the Wing Bow, which is now going to be a lot better, as you will see later, for the evasion. And all of a sudden, you're equipped to deal with this enemy carry very, very well, even if you're slightly behind. Where before, you just didn't have this kind of option, which is awesome. This is new like meta strategy stuff added to the game. I'm sad that Ironstone is being removed. If I could bring it back, I would. I'm sorry, guys. Now, Portal Key nerf. This is another controversial part, and I'm gonna try and convince you of why this is good. And I remind you that I had no say in these changes whatsoever. Well, not whatsoever, for the most part. Cost increased by 100 gold, cooldown increased by 1 second, and they stopped the exploit, where you could drop it on the ground, pick it up, and then cooldown on, which made for big plays. Now, let's begin. First of all, the cost increase and cooldown increase. I think that Portal Key as an item is overpowered because it craps all over good positioning. You can be like a god of positioning and be super well positioned and super far away from enemies, and this item just negates all of that. It doesn't matter where you stand, there will be a freaking behemoth or a magmas that will Portal Key and get you from huge range, and basically nothing matters. And that's what I don't like about this item, and why I like the nerf to this item, and why I will drink some water right now. Now the question is, was this item nerfed too much? And I think the answer is no. Because think of all the heroes that usually get this item. Your magmas, your behemoth, your whatever. Will those heroes stop getting this item now? 99% of cases, the answer is going to be no. They will still get this item, which means it is still good, at least in my opinion. Now the sort of a bit controversial part. Removing the exploit, where you could drop it on the ground, pick it up, and Portal Key away even if you're taking damage, which some pro players have used. The key point here is that it was not an intended mechanic. It was an abuse of an essentially bug, and a big reason for changing it to remove the exploit is to be consistent. The point of portal key was not to let you escape. That's why there was added a cooldown for when you take damage, to prevent escaping. I think we have all heard a lot about escape mechanisms and how they're not good, because every freaking hero has one nowadays. And it's become sort of a joke of, oh, he has an escape mechanism. Another new hero with an escape mechanism. King Cloud, the new hero, has an escape mechanism. Oh, ho, 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 it's so terrible. This item contributes to the problem. It gives you an escape mechanism on a hero that would normally just not have one. Or even if you already have an escape mechanism, it gives you an extra one. And that is a problem. The purpose of this item is to help you initiate. It's not to let you escape by some kind of abuse of a mechanic. If we are to stay consistent, and if we are to solve problems of this game, like there being too many escape mechanisms, like making positioning more important, like making your heroes matter more, we have to fix these type of things. Yes, it's sometimes made for big plays, but that's a very short-term goal, or short-term vision. Changing this is a long-term goal, to make the game healthier in the long run. That's why that change was made, and why I'm for this change. I was on the fence about it at some point, but then I decided to really think about it and why we're making this change, and that's what conclusion I arrived to. It's just better for the game. Next we have some balance changes. I'm just gonna say that I don't agree with all of these, but there's a lot of them. I'll just mention a few interesting ones. Homecoming Stone cost has been reduced. The first thing that comes to my mind is the toilet paper trap, also known as the TP trap, that you can fall into. The trap goes like this. You're in lane, you're playing, you die. You respawn, you lost some gold because you died. You buy a Homecoming Stone to return to lane, which means you lose some more gold. You return to lane, you die again. You lose gold, you buy TP, you lose gold again. And the toilet paper trap is basically a cycle where you're stuck on the same amount of gold even though you're farming. And it's just terrible. And this change helps that specific thing. But Homecoming Stone, most overpowered item in the game, as I've mentioned before. Now it's even more overpowered, but I think it's okay, kind of. It's kind of sort of accepted that Homecoming Stone, like wards, are just going to be strong no matter what. So might as well make the toilet paper trap a bit, that's copyrighted by the way, a bit less, I'm not even sure, just terrible. Some changes to balance, some of them I agree with, some of them I don't. Work Club, this is one of the changes that I don't really agree with. The price of it has been increased to 1800. It gives you 40 attack speed, right? The problem is that if you take this 1800 gold and you spend this exact 1800 gold on damage items, in vast majority of cases, damage is going to be better, and usually a lot better. Like getting a bit of attack speed, like a Steam Boots, puts you in a situation where damage is gonna just be more valuable, at least at this cost efficiency. And this is why I think perhaps this was nerfed a little bit too much, needs some kind of adjustments, or the damage items need to be nerfed to compensate. As it stands, spending your gold on attack speed is kind of worse than spending them on damage, which might, really worse, which might explain why some people think that Arclight Crown is underwhelming. Might. Not for sure. It could be a problem with just the item itself, but it might be because attack speed is sort of inefficient right now. At least with this. Now, Alchemist Bones now takes electric. This is not too big of a change, but one weird thing about it is that it now takes the new attack speed item for 1200 gold, right? And the recipe cost has been decreased for 650. Now, technically, this means that for the item to pay for itself, it only now needs to make more than 650 gold instead of 900. Because you're buying the recipe and that gives you the active effect, so as long as you pay for the recipe, you pay for the item, because Alacrity Band is an item of its own. So technically it's now easier for it to pay for itself and kind of better, and the total recipe cost has been reduced, but it shouldn't be too big of a difference. Cannon nerfs, Shroud nerfs, Astrolabe sort of a small buff, Very Idle sort of a small buff. Behemoth Heart, now this change I want everyone to kind of keep an eye on. I think it could potentially become like a bit dangerous. Behemoth's Heart has been receiving buffs constantly for the last few patches. Now its cost has been decreased and gives you even more health, I would be on the lookout for this item. It could potentially be a bit too good now. But I don't know. Nobody's crying about it yet, and everything has been reworked, so maybe I'm completely wrong. Blood Chalice is also another item that has been consistently receiving buffs, and it's pretty freaking good now. Like, if there's, I would say, almost no situation where Blood Chalice is a bad pickup. It's just that good of an item at this point, I think. But we'll see. These changes are all kind of okay. Elder Parasite is an important change. Now, Elder Parasite, the problem with the item was that it countered its own weakness. I don't think that it was mathematically insane, but it countered its own weakness, which I think was a really dumb design. So it made you take extra damage, which was supposedly the weakness of the item, but it gave you a ton of health, which just countered that weakness. So instead, the health part, the beast heart, has been replaced with a life tube, so now instead of giving health, it gives you health regen, which is great. The lifesteal has been buffed a bit, the activation modifier part was removed so that you can use it together with a shrunken head, but the key change here is that it no longer gives you health, it just gives you health regen, which also opens a new build order at the start where you can go for a life tube if you plan to turn into an Elder Parasite, which is a good item to pick up early game in the laning phase. Genjiro, this is one change that I'm kind of like weird about. The agility, it now gives more agility but less damage, which is, I think, overall a nerf to the item, but it makes the item worse on heroes that are not agility heroes. And in general, I'm an advocate of making items more viable on more heroes. And I think Genjiro was kind of in a good spot where sometimes some heroes that are not agility would get it, but it would still be mainly good on agility. But this kind of, I think, pushes a bit too much in that direction. Harkon's Blade was nerfed. Now, this is a change in which I can sort of... I'm not sure. We've added a lot of armor in this patch. A lot of new ways to acquire physical armor, which might make Harkon's Blade a lot better. So it's hard to tell if it's underpowered or overpowered. Hellfire has received some slight adjustments, but in general should still be a decent pickup, even not on a primarily intelligence hero. Hell and Black Legion buff was needed. I kind of the goddess changes are. I'm not sure if this might have been a bit too much of a nerf. I think Kind of the Goddess just got to a point after all the buffs where finally people started picking it up. So I'm not sure if this nerf was a bit of an overreaction. Other changes are fine. Mock of Brilliance, I can tell you from just like playing and seeing it in game, this change is quite significant. The damage type changed from magic to true makes this item a lot stronger against enemy heroes. A lot stronger. So this item isn't just good for farming if you get it early, but it translates better into the late game where it deals a lot more damage. So really, really keep an eye on Mock of Brilliance. I think it's going to be a really good item now. Gnome's Wisdom received changes where it's no longer terrible. So instead of taking some sort of weird components, and now take some Mystic Vestments, which is a very useful general purpose item. Ring of the Teacher, also usually a very useful item. And a Mana Tube, which is kind of like, okay, meh. And when you combine it, it gives you an aura that gives magic armor. The first aura in the game that gives you magic armor in addition to normal armor. Which means when the enemy team has a lot of magic damage dealers, this item is very good against that. So if you're a support and you're not sure what to get, try to take a look at the enemy team to counter it. If they have a lot of magic damage, consider picking up this item. It's especially better in supports because the build-up items are now just great if you're a support compared to the old, like, a major totem, which is kind of a bit of stats, which is okay in a support, but nothing special. So, yeah, very interesting change here. Definitely looking forward to seeing more of this item. And definitely just no longer kind of a dead item. You can pick it up on a lot more heroes because it's not just intelligence based. And just a very solid rework of this item. I'm a big fan of this, so thumbs up for this. No Fireblade, I think it was nerfed a bit too hard. The main change is that it no longer upgrades, and the first level of it is sort of buffed, sort of nerfed, and it's a lot better on agility heroes. So if you're an agility hero and you're considering picking up something that helps you carry, or especially if you have some kind of base damage bonus, like Moon Queen or Andromeda, this item is now a lot better because it just primarily gives you a ton of agility, 30 agility. The intelligence has been removed completely, but it now doesn't upgrade anymore, and it's kind of weaker in terms of damage. This change here, the active now deals 1000 damage to summoned units instead of instantly killing them. Just want to explain this a bit more. It will still do the exact same thing as before, except one case, and that is against Hellbringer. It will no longer one-shot the enemy Hellbringer's Malphus, the ultimate. Instead, on levels 2 and 3 of Hellbringer's ultimate, it will now take 2 Nullfire Blade uses to kill it. So basically it doesn't super hard counter Hellbringer anymore, which I think is a good change. That was a bit of too hard of a random hard counter. Now Nullstone has received also an interesting change where Glowstone is now going to see more use, and it's kind of easier to build, taking advantage of an underused item which you can maybe pick up in the early game now, instead of just getting like a Blessed Orb to just finish the recipe like you would before. Refreshing Ornament should now be a potential pickup if you're a support. The 3 health region, the increase from 2 to 3 is quite significant for such a cheap item, so I would definitely consider it. Cooldraw Sheepstick received an interesting change. It now gives you 50 intelligence, which is the highest amount of intelligence for a single slot. There's going to be some interesting uses for this, but in general, it's worse on heroes that are not intelligent, like say a Magmus or Behemoth, which I think is okay for such a powerful item. But we'll see. Shieldbreaker received an interesting change, where on level 3, it now applies a stacking -1 armor debuff to buildings, which makes pushing strategies more viable by not just buffing minions, but, for example, building a carry into a pushing strategy. Like specifically picking up a carry or some kind of farming hero that will farm a shield breaker just so that he will help you push with your heroes that are otherwise pushers. So just interesting options being opened up. Spell Sunder. These changes are finally making this item not completely horrible in every possible sense of the word. Now, the problem with Spell Sunder, aside from it being super weak, was that it was essentially Spell Shards. Spell Shards is an item that gives a lot of mana regen, and increases your magic damage. In other words, it was Spell Sunder, which gives you a lot of mana regen, and increases your magic damage. So now that has been changed so that now it takes a Glowstone, which is actually a pretty big difference. Because now it's different from Spell Shards. It gives you health, so it increases your survivability. It doesn't just increase your mana and damage output. So that's quite a significant change, and I think it kind of makes the item stand on its own quite well. The other thing to consider is that the new item Thunderclaw, it now triggers every 3 charges, which is pretty often. So because this item is not so focused on intelligence anymore and actually gives you some survivability and just like the stats are more spread out, potentially maybe this can be picked up on some carries or some kind of damage dealers in combination with some magic damage items like a Thunderclaw, because it will proc from that. A lot of interesting options being opened up with this change, which I find very nice. So yeah, just think about that, guys. Potentially pick up Spell Thunder on just auto attackers that somehow deal magic damage. Maybe even Ravenor. I mean, that health is pretty significant of a change. Spell Shards magic armor pierced increased from 50 to 60%. That's a pretty cool change. I picked up Spell Shards quite often before because it's just a good mana regen item that also makes your magic damage not completely suck in the late game. So just for the same purposes, you can still get Spell Shards. It's cool. It's cool. Storm Spirit received a cool buff, nothing special to mention there. Table of Command received a very interesting change, which I think is for the better. Major Totem was removed, and instead it's now replaced with Guardian Ring, which is the 2 armor ring item, which costs 175 gold. Now, wait, no. Remember this moment. Remember this moment. Guardian Ring, Tablet of Command, alright? I'll say that now, a bit later, alright? So, the big part of this change is that Tablet of Command was sort of ridiculous, because you got it on every freaking support. Every support would almost always get this item, and it would almost never be bad. So now, that is being made worse. This item is now better against enemy teams who have a decent amount of physical damage, because it gives armor. And it's worse in all other situations, which makes all the other items shine more, which is a very, very welcome change. And that's kind of all there is to say about it. Good change to an item that just everyone ever gets. White Talisman, all stats decreased by 1, that's fine. I think in the patch where the cost of Void Talisman was decreased, I said that Void Talisman is too good. So yeah, it's finally getting nerfed. It's supposed to be brought back down where it should be. Now, Whispering Helm, this is one of the few changes, potentially the only change where I had some input. This change here is important. The damage part is not too important. Lifesteal increased, also not too important. Now gives dominated creeps a permanent 50 movement speed and 1 mana regen. I'm gonna probably make a video about this where I try and play it in game, but Whispering Helm strategies should now be viable and a lot better. And for players who want to control multiple units and really take advantage of skill, for example, like with the old courier, you would say, or like with Ophelia, can now use this item. Now, why does 50% movement speed make a huge difference? Now, first of all, movement speed in general was nerfed in this patch, so heroes have less movement speed in general. But this 50 extra movement speed means that creeps can now catch up to enemy heroes, or at least move at the same speed, which is a very big deal because before, enemy heroes could just outrun them, but now you can catch up with them. And the 1 mana regen means that you don't have to constantly return them to base after every few skill casts. So this is a really big change to make strategies involving controlling creeps a lot more viable. So if you get this item now, it's not going to be just for the lifesteal and the damage. It's going to be for dominating creeps, which I think is going to be really cool, and potentially this will sort of become my item now. At least I will try make it my item, where I like get it on every hero ever, like, I don't know, a Glacius with Whispering Helm or something. Now, Demonic Breastplate change, to sum up, it basically now has 2 modes. In one mode, it gives more armor to your allies, +7, and less to your, and deducts less from enemies, only -3, which is defensive mode. Offensive mode, it only gives your allies 3 armor, but it reduces 7 from enemies. So, sort of makes strategies involving reducing armor, like with a shield breaker and stuff, makes potentially pushing strategies better as well, because you now have more options to reduce enemy tower armor. Frostfield plate removed, it's kind of Ultra's heavy plate now. Soulsborg, now this is another important change, and now this is the moment. Remember when I told you with Table of Command, remember? This is the moment you are remembering for. The recipe has been changed from 2 ring mails and a recipe to a ring mail and a guardian ring. Now, this is why I love this patch, where there's so much hidden new strategy. Imagine this. Your support and the enemy team has a ton of physical damage, like just a lot of physical damage. And you get, at the start of the game, or like early on in the game, like throughout laning phase, 4 guardian rings. Get 4 guardian rings for just a ton of very cheap, very efficient armor to counter them. And then you turn all of them into support items. 1 guardian ring goes into Ring of the Teacher, which turns later into a Gnome's Wisdom, which is now a lot better in supports. Another goes into this item, Soul's Bulwark. Another you turn into a Tablet of Command. Another you turn into Lex Talionis. And there you go. These new strategies with starting items that are being added to the game are really cool. Like the one with Crushing Claws as well, because now you have a new item, the Soul Trap, which can maybe get some Crushing Claws at the start. 4 Guardian Rings is a strat at the start of the game. I don't know, this sounds pretty cool to me. You actually have a reason to potentially pick up Guardian Rings just so that they sit there in your inventory for the bonus, which I think is awesome. The item is now a bit cheaper, so it's easier to build, especially because the build-up is easier as well. And the armor aura has been lowered. I suppose that's okay. So Dawnbringer changes. It was in general nerfed a little bit, but I'll explain the light brand changes later on. Frostful Skull is now the exact same as the other brands. So the way you upgrade Firebrand is you get Firebrand plus Blessed Orb plus 800 gold recipe, Geometra's Bane. Lightbrand plus Blessed Orb plus 800 recipe, Grimoire of Power. Frostful Skull is now the same. Icebrand, Blessed Orb, 800 gold recipe, Frostful Skull. The glowstone has been removed from the recipe. So it follows the other 2 items more closely now. The biggest change is that the attack speed debuff has been changed from percent-based -20% to just -20, which is kind of a lot worse. But I think it's still a potentially viable counter carry item because it slows enemy carries damage and also slows down his movement speed. And it now gets the active effect of Frostfield Plate, where it creates the Ring of Ice, dealing damage and slowing. Overall, I think Frostful Skull will be a much more viable item now So you guys better use it, especially potential on heroes like Behemoth, because he benefits from the strength, which it gives a lot of, which benefits his base damage. So yeah, overall very good changes. I had some kind of other ideas for Frostal Skull, but this is a really good one too. Now, Grimoire of Power and Lightbrand. I think this is where I will go over the Lightbrand changes. Lightbrand has been changed, and I'm happy. I sort of wanted to remove the mana regen from Lightbrand because I didn't like how it just free mana regen. But they decided to remove the steering area effect, the burning thingy. Now, it was replaced with a very strange, in my opinion, mechanic that I'm not a huge fan of, but whatever. When you cast a skill, the next attack you do will deal bonus damage based on the mana cost. So if you cast a big skill with a lot of mana cost, well, it will deal a lot of bonus damage. As far as I know, it doesn't really work on abilities that kind of consume mana over time, like, for example, Dr. Repulsor's Ultimate, so don't think you can pull off some crazy shenanigans there. But in general, it's just a nerf to the item and sort of a mechanic that I don't think many people will use often. Now, the reason I didn't like mana regen on Lightbrand is because if you were a carry and you went for Frostburn and you needed mana, you always had just a very cheap kind of cheesy item. You could just get a Lightbrand, turn into Dawnbringer, and boom, all of your mana regen problems solved. Just like that. You don't need to worry about mana regen items, which made all the other mana regen items worse, because you just didn't need it. So that's why I want to nerf the mana regen. But nerfing this part of the item is sort of also good, because as long as you just kind of discourage people from getting it, that's good. That's why Lightbrand was nerfed. I'm a fan of this change. I welcome any Lightbrand nerf, even though I wanted a different one. But the other part of Grimoire of Power is that it no longer passively gives you 15% damage. Thank you. Thank you for not just giving you passive damage. The one thing I hated... I hated more things about Grimoire of Power, but one of the things I hated about it was the passive magic damage increase. Now, I think that we should stay consistent. Magic damage is supposed to be worse late game. Alright? Normal physical damage carries are the ones who are supposed to farm and excel late game, and there should be strategy around that mechanic. But with items like this, that just give you a boost to all damage, my cat is eating something retarded, Kitty, stop it! So items like this just give you an increase in magic damage, against everything, creeps, heroes, doesn't matter. At the very least, spell charts kind of only works against heroes, and against Asians. But this item just straight up give you a buff to all of your magic damage. It's like, oh, wait, what? Carries are supposed to be physical damage based, and physical damage is supposed to scale into late game, where magic damage shouldn't? Nah. Let's just make all damage scale. Let's just make everyone a carry. Yeah, sure, good idea. So finally this is being changed. It's now an active effect, which increased all your spell damage by 20%, which, important to note, this is both magic and physical damage. Any spell damage. That's not magic, spell. So anything you deal from spells will be increased. For 6 seconds, now works for 6 seconds and a 60-second cooldown. Cool, really nice. You can't just use it for farming anymore, so it doesn't just straight up boost your magic damage for all situations, which is welcome. Thank you for this change. Thank you. Good change. Good change. There's also a good change. Now, SomaZ, we got to the important part. I wanted to do this change a bit differently, but who cares what I think, right? So instead, the changes we got is that True Strike has been removed from the item. It no longer gives you passive True Strike, always. This is a very good change because this item, SomaZ, single-handedly destroyed Winged Bow. I heard some reports that people still picked up Winged Bow, and I'm sorry, but that's bad. You should not get Winged Bow, especially if then, like people told me, even when someone had SomaZ, they still picked up Winged Bow. Like, why? Part of the Winged Bow's build-up is the Snake Bracelet, which costs 1,800, close to 2,000 gold. And that part, close to 2,000 gold, is getting completely countered by this item. Why would you invest 2,000 almost gold into nothing, essentially? So SomaZ has been nerfed, so now Winged Bow is not completely super terrible and easily countered. Unless you're like super far ahead and you get it and you try in the game as soon as possible before the enemy carry has the brains to get a SomaZ. Now SomaZ is not a complete like, oh, Winged Bow is useless item. Instead, the way it works now is when you miss, the next 3 attacks after that will not miss. So you will gain True Strike for 3 attacks. It's on a 6.5-second cooldown, so you can miss, do your 3 attacks, and then you can miss a lot more without gaining the true strike back. So a lot of people have asked, well, why would you get Savage Mace now? It still has the mini stun with the bonus damage, and the way I always looked at Savage Mace, because I literally almost never see Wingbow being picked up. The way I look at Savage Mace is, well, does the enemy team have some channeling skills? So if the enemy team has some channeling skills like Magma's ultimate, or perhaps Succubus, which can ult as well, you get Savage Mace to cancel it. And if they have evasion as well, or like potential to go for a Wingbow, you get it in that case as well. And if they somehow combine and they have evasion and channeling, that's when you get Savage Mace. So you actually have to look at the situation instead of blindly getting this item, which is very good. And Wingbow, evasion has been increased, damage has been slightly decreased, whatever. The biggest change about... Oh wait, no, there's another big change. Melee heroes no longer get that weird thing where when you get attacked and you evade the skill, you reflect 25% of the damage you would have evaded, something weird. Instead, the melee bonus is a lot more straightforward and a lot better. You get 10 movement speed and unit walking that you can turn off if you want. And ranged heroes still get ranged. Straightforward, simple, good. And the biggest change is that Savage Mace no longer completely destroys this item, which will make this item be seen a lot more. And will feed this item into the anti-carry metagame, which I was talking about, because the evasion is very significant against enemy carries. Charge Hammer was removed, Thunderclaw was reworked. It now gives a bit of agility and damage, instead of just a bit of attack speed and damage instead of pure attack speed. Now there's two sides to this. First of all, it's weird because it now procs every 3 hits, which means that attack speed with Thunderclaw is very, very good now. On the other hand, it makes the item better on heroes that don't really need attack speed and instead like damage. Like, for example, Arachna or Emerald Warden. Emerald Warden Q benefits from damage. For Arachna, attacking faster is not good because your Q doesn't benefit from it, because you're just reapplying the buff, it doesn't stack. So for those heroes which kind of lacked farming options, they now have kind of a decent farming option because it gives damage and not just pure attack speed. So that's a good thing. And that's why I think this change can be good. The other changes are just sort of adjustments, overall speed, movement speed nerfs, reducing the amount of movement speed in the game. I'll give my thoughts on that in a moment. All of this is good stuff. And we're at the end. So movement speed changes. Why has movement speed been reduced? So there has been this thing called movement speed inflation in the game, right? What that means is that too many things give movement speed and it's just too easy to become very fast. Now the reason that's not a good thing is because, first of all, movement speed stops to matter because everyone is just going to be fast no matter what. Like, your hero does not matter as much if you give some kind of movement speed bonus because everyone is just fast. In fact, everyone is a bit too fast and movement speed is being handed out kind of freely. And the limit of the movement speed, 522, is supposed to be there to say, whoa, 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 you're going way too fast. You should be limited, but this is like still really high. 522, damn, you're fast, nigga. But the problem was that it wasn't that fast of a movement speed limit because everyone else was sort of close to that limit because there was so much movement speed. It was really not that hard to reach that limit, and that was a problem. So what this change does to kind of limit movement speed is, first of all, it allows us to control it a lot more. And it's not just freely handing out movement speed to everyone anymore. And your base movement speed is not as bad anymore. But also, heroes that benefit from movement speed are now a lot more important and better. Because reaching maximum movement speed, like for example with a War Beast, is actually more significant now. Because everyone doesn't just have maximum movement speed for free almost. And also, if you decide to invest into specifically just getting movement speed items, now that's going to be better, because it's not so easy to just hit that limit. So that's why I think those changes to movement speed are good. I don't agree with the arguments that it slows down the game. The reason I always thought that HoN was fast is because of the fast response times and how fast skills work and how fast damage is dealt, not because you moved fast. So I don't really agree with that statement. That's gonna be it for this patch. Huge patch. After this video done, I'm gonna go play. The new hero King Cloud is pretty cool. I think he could be a little bit overpowered. He's like really strong, especially if you learn to play him. He's super fun to play. His skill effects look amazing. There are 17 avatars, which the last couple of days, the last few days, since last freaking week, I've been making an avatar video about, which is finally done. 17 avatars in a single video. Jesus Christ. And I hope you guys enjoy this video, and I will see you probably within this week. I will make another video, okay? Okay. My voice is dead. See ya.